This is Wildcat Country.
Larson tipped it. Love has it. Lewis slams it, and Arizona wins it.
The inside scoop on the Arizona Wildcats.
It's Gunnar Maldonado. He's got blockers. Touchdown, Arizona.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to bear down.
Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country presented by Harrah's Auction Casino. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale, and hey, it's the end of May, and we're still talking about live sports. Thank you, Arizona baseball. Shane, do we have a show for everyone tonight?
We have a deluxe baseball preview episode of Wildcat Country. Give me the chance. You always mention the guests. I'll mention it. We have Chip Hale, the head baseball coach for Arizona, who Eric has always been sung the praises of. And then our old friend Shotgun Spratling from D1Baseball.com is going to provide some excellent analysis of Arizona and the region they're in, including Oregon and their Arizona's first round opponent, Cal Poly. So it's going to be a great show. I don't know about you, Eric. I watched most of the Big 12 tournament, some of it at work, and then the end of the game against TCU. I took my wife and I took our son and a friend of his to the Great Wolf Lodge for the weekend to celebrate his graduation from kindergarten. And so I caught the end of that game in the middle of a crazy arcade in Great Wolf Lodge. So that was a lot of fun. Glad that we have some. We're already planning a big baseball show, and it only makes it more exciting that we have another conference championship tournament championship anyway to talk about, and looking forward to it. It'll be fun.
Yeah, we had a chance to sit down with Shotgun yesterday, we're recording this on Tuesday night, so we'll talk to Chip in the middle, but we talked to Shotgun on Monday. He gave us, as I like to say about when we have Matt Moreno on, his class is in session, the professor. Shotgun is the professor of baseball.
Oh, yeah.
So get ready. That is a thorough conversation.
Yeah. I'll just say real quick, if you don't know, like if you're not too familiar with Arizona baseball and you're like, no, well, they just won a big conference tournament, maybe I'll check them out in regionals. This is how you get caught up. Shotgun's fair. He's got Arizona plays Cal Poly. He's got the preview of that game. Talks about Oregon, Utah Valley. So he's got you covered. So he's just like guys to look out for and things to watch during the games. It's really good stuff. And you can tell I got a haircut in between the interviews because on Monday night I was a little bit shaggier than I am now.
And now it is time for buy or sell. And let's start with it, Shane. Arizona wins the Big 12 championship. Second straight year they've won a conference championship. I mean, incredible. You win the Pac-12 last year. You win the Big 12 this year. You got to the finals of the Pac-12 2 years ago. So no matter what Arizona baseball does this postseason, Chip Hale should be extended and be Arizona's coach for the long haul.
Well, it'd be pretty awkward if I sold it with him being a guest on the show. But even if he wasn't, yeah, no doubt, buy that. It's an easy one. He's built a consistently good team in Tucson. It took a little while, but he got there, or at least a little while in terms of our impatient standards today, right? I think his staff's ability to reload at the pitching position in particular, after losing so many great arms from last year's team, is extremely impressive. And he's shown that Arizona can be competitive and then some. Arizona's not the level of baseball program that's going to make the College World Series every year, but they should make it to regionals at the very least each year. They're capable of that, and they've done that consistently with Chip. And I think that eventually, whether it's this year or in the future, because Arizona does have a tough draw, the wins in the postseason will come. But yeah, I think there was some rebuilding to do, certainly after Jay Johnson spurned us. But I think he's done a heck of a job. It was kind of a wild card pick at the time because he comes from the Major League Baseball world. It's kind of similar to Jed Fish, really. Except Chip does have those close U of A ties, and I believe him when he says he wants to retire with his job. So, absolutely, 100% buy that one.
All right. So here's the thing. I've been critical of Chip Hale. We're going to have him on the show a little bit later on. But listen, you've won back-to-back conference tournaments. Your team is showing up. I'm going to ask him about if he would consider what they've done already a successful season. I'm kind of curious what he has to say about that. With that said, he's gotten him to four straight postseason trips. Now he has 2 wins and they were in elimination games. And the first one, I'd like to show me something this year to eliminate all doubt. I personally, as of right now, Shane, I mean, I'm probably not going to pick them just because of his postseason history to do anything. I don't think they'll come out of that region. Now I need to break it down more, but I would say my initial pick would be Oregon, at home as the top seed. As we know in college baseball, it's wide open. If Chip Hale and Arizona wins this region, it eliminates all doubt to this.
Well, I agree. I think I got more to say. I'll just say I agree with that. Although I still think a good showing, even if they it comes down to Arizona and Oregon at the end would be impressive. A quick note from our friend Blair Willis. So former U of A head baseball coach Andy Lopez, his longtime assistant coach Mark Wazakowski is the current Oregon head coach.
Oh, wow.
And I guess Wazakowski, he played on the Pepperdine National Championship team that Eddie Lopez coached in 1992. So a little bit of the subplot there if Arizona and Oregon happen to meet.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I would be a fun thing. Win on Friday, or I think is it Friday through Sunday regional?
I think it's a Thursday. It starts on a Thursday.
Yeah, I'd have to double check that. I missed the schedule. Nonetheless, I think that Arizona, you got to win some games this postseason. But you know what?
Sorry, it is Friday. Sorry.
Friday,
I'm talking
Sunday,
out of
okay.
my rear end. Go ahead.
Listen, I'd like to see them win some games. Finally, like get that narrative out so we don't have to talk about it.
Yeah.
Chip Hale, the thing about him, he's not going anywhere. And he's not taking another job. He's probably not getting another big league job. Like he told you the other year, Shane, when you had him on, and I wasn't able to do the interview the first time. This is what he expects to be a destination job for him.
Yeah.
I hope he can be here 15 more years and lead Arizona to Omaha. He's got a pretty good team, obviously. They just went and won the Big 12 Conference Championship as the 4th seed. Show me something.
Yeah.
But I can't advocate for firing him, even if they lose 2 in a row. What they've done in the conference tournaments has been enough.
And I'll say, I said this a while ago, but I think baseball is one of the biggest wild cards in all of college sports where Arizona they could easily go 0-2 in regionals again. They could go on to Omaha. I think either is equally possible just because of the wide open nature of baseball, more so than football, more so than softball, maybe even men's basketball and women's basketball, certainly. So, think about the 2012 team that won the whole thing. They got hot at the right time. And Ole Miss a couple of years ago is another great example of that. So it's really wide open when you get to the postseason.
Shane, buy or sell, Arizona was worthy of hosting a regional.
I'll sell it just because I think they were worthy, but I can't argue with the decision to not have them host. I don't think their case this year was quite as compelling as last year's. First
Agreed.
of all,
Yeah.
they won the Pac-12 regular season and tournament titles last year, and the Pac-12 was a bit better than last year than the Big 12 is this year. I mean, look at Oregon, Oregon State, UCLA all hosting. I mean, there's a reason for that. And Arizona's proven. I think USC as well. Arizona's proven they can play with anyone. And look, their resume is impressive. They had a case. 23 wins over quad 1 or 2 teams, which is more than I think all but 3 teams in the entire country had. But I think they just had a couple too many losses to bad teams. That home series against Utah, which they finished last in the conference, it just sticks out like a sore thumb. That's the kind of series you need to not just win, but sweep to get consideration for being a top 16 seed in a conference like the Big 12. And Arizona almost got swept in that series. So I think the RPI system is a little, let's just say, bad. And we'll bring it up with Shotgun when we chat with him. And I think it needs to be revamped. But I'm not going to complain about Arizona where they were placed in the postseason because I think that was about right.
All right, so we've talked baseball. We're going to talk a bunch of baseball later in the show. So we'll get more to that. We were recording last week's episode during the softball elimination game, Arizona Ole Miss. And the Wildcats were losing. And they ended up losing the game and didn't get a heck of a lot closer at that point. So there's been a discussion among Arizona fans that it's time for Caitlin Lowe to be on the extreme hot seat. Now, are we buying that, or is Caitlin Lowe fairly safe where she's at?
Well, first of all, I'm going to note that Ole Miss did advance to the Women's College World Series. They beat Arkansas in 3 games. So,
I actually didn't realize that. Okay,
they were no slouches. Okay. I'm going to sell that simply because if you look at Arizona's performance since she took over, it looks very similar to what Arizona had done in the previous almost 10 years of Mike Candrea's tenure, the last
Okay.
10 years of his tenure. Arizona was one of the two best softball programs in the country for almost 2 decades, along with UCLA. But
Hmm.
they hadn't been up there in a while. They had an 8-year stretch from 2011 to 18 when they didn't even make the Women's College World Series. So Arizona had already gone from arguably the best softball program in the nation to a consistent top 20 program, but not a top tier, like top two, top five program. I don't know the reason for the drop off, but it was already there. So if Arizona is going to consider a change, I think the question has to be asked, is it realistic to expect whoever were to come in to be able to get the program back to where it was, or has that ship sailed? And I don't know the answer to that question. And the one big difference between Arizona softball from the early 90s to the late 2000s when they won 8 championships, the difference between then and since then, I beat this drum so many times. I'm going to say it again. It's a star pitcher. That was the common
Yeah.
denominator in
Yeah.
all of
Hmm.
Arizona's
Yeah.
national titles, from Nancy Evans to Jenny Finch, Taryn Moat, Alicia Hollowell. Arizona just hasn't had that in a while. Devin Netz was very good. Miranda Stoddard was very good. They weren't top 10, at least in pitching. And that didn't start with Caitlin Lowe. And I just think it's important to keep that in mind when you're evaluating the softball program.
I think she's getting a raw deal from fans saying, we expect, as you said, we expect to be in the glory of the Mike Candrea era. That was before. I mean, the world's a lot different
Yeah.
now. College sports are a lot different now. You can't expect that kind of success. With that said, you probably should have found a pitcher at some point, and Candrea should have. I mean, Arizona, since Kenzie Fowler was maybe the last big name pitcher
Yeah.
that Arizona softball's had.
Good name, too. Yeah.
It'd be nice to find one, but who are you going to get that's better? And how
Mm,
much further are you really expecting to go?
yeah.
If Arizona goes to Oklahoma City once every 3 to 4 years, I think that's a pretty fair deal in this day and age.
Yeah.
And in Caitlin Lowe's, I believe 4 years, right, Shane? She's been there once.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to see it in the coming years. She should have a good team coming back next year. I don't think the Big 12 is nearly as strong a softball conference as the Pac-12. Show me something. With that said, I think it is unfair, in my opinion, to be calling for her head.
Well, yeah, I tend to agree with that, and I think, like Chip, Caitlin's an alum, and I don't think that's a must in a head coach, but I do think that it makes it that much more personal. She wants to win here. She knows what it takes to win here, and the hitting's been great. I mean, they were one of the best hitting teams in the country this year, and
Hmm.
they have been for a while. It's just you need that one ace, and I don't know what's going to take. Of course, yeah, I don't know if NIL really factors into softball. I just honestly don't, and that would be a good question for someone who knows better than me. But between that and the transfer portal, you got to find a way to land a top 5, top 10 national pitcher, because that you have one of those. That's the difference between going to regionals and going to the College World Series in
Right.
softball. It's that important.
So the last element of buy or sell this week, that CBS ranked the 68 Power Four head coaches heading into 2025, and Brent Brennan was ranked 66th of 68.
Mm.
How would you judge that ranking? Fair, fair and justified, idiotic, somewhere in between? Your thoughts?
Here I'll hedge a little bit, but here's what I will buy.
Okay.
We mentioned last week we had a very candid and open conversation with Brent Brennan in Scottsdale at the Bear Down Takeover. It was a great time, a great chat with him. Based on our chat, and getting to know him a little bit better away from just the Q&A format of this
Hmm.
podcast, I think he'd probably say that ranking was fair until his team starts winning more. I think that's what he would probably say.
Okay.
Whether he believes it or not is another thing, but I think he's a pretty what you see is what you get kind of guy.
Yeah.
I think he's a better coach than that ranking. I think Arizona is going to at least somewhat exceed low expectations this year.
Okay.
They're very low, so exceeding them won't take much, but I think they will comfortably.
Hmm.
But I don't think he'd have a problem with that list if we asked him about it. And I think he'd be the first to admit that he has more to prove in order to move up that list.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think everybody looks at last year saying Arizona had a winning team. They had, Tedero McMillan, they had Noah Fafita. I think looking back on it, and I don't want to give Brent Brennan, I don't want to say, oh, he did a good job. I think we overrated that team going into it last year. They lost a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean, the injuries were obviously not great and all that. And the team was disappointing. But I think my perspective changed a little bit after talking with him, and I'm, as I said last week, I'm more fired up for this season than I probably was beforehand. With that said, the ranking is fully justified. He has proven nothing at the Power Four level in his one season. They were a disappointment.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't have any problem with that ranking. I will be curious. After thinking about it, if Arizona wins 4 games again this year, I think he's gone. I don't think they can justify bringing him back. I don't think Desiree Reed-Francois can justify bringing him back for another year.
You and I are going to disagree on that. In this, we've already disagreed on this point, but I think there are different versions of 4-8. There is a 4-8, which we saw last year, where Arizona was not competitive at all in most of the games they lost. And there's 4-8, where say if they were to do that this year and lose close games to very good teams, if they were to go into Ames and lose by a touchdown, and that was one of their 8 losses, and then they have a lot of losses like that, then I think you can at least see progress going in the right direction. Sometimes, even with NIL in the transfer portal, it takes time to turn that ship in the right direction. So I think that's a bit simplistic. I know it all ultimately comes down to wins and losses. That's what matters. But I think you have to look big picture when you're making changes like this. And I think that if Arizona shows some improvement, it is at least more competitive this year, because none of us are expecting them to win the Big 12 by any means. If they are at least more competitive, they find a way to win 1 or 2 more games and/or are put up a good showing against teams like Iowa State, then I think we probably all feel a little bit better about it. And if nothing else, I think it would give Desiree Reed-Francois a reason to keep him around for a 3rd year.
Why wait for rewards, Wildcat fans at Harrah's Auction Casino? Your play today means free play tomorrow. Sign up for Caesars Rewards, play your favorite slots, and unlock up to $25 in next day free slot play. Plus, your rewards go beyond the casino. Enjoy dining, entertainment, hotel stays, and more at 50 plus destinations nationwide. Bear down, play today, get rewarded tomorrow only at Harrah's Auction Casino. Must be 21 or older to gamble. Know when to stop before you start. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700 or 1-800-NEXT-STEP. Visit the Caesars Rewards Center for details. Coming up next, we have 2 interviews on this show. Can you believe it? Chip Hale going to join us, and then Shotgun Spratling here on Wildcat Country. Shane, for the second consecutive year, the Wildcats have won their conference tournament. Last year, the Pac-12. This year, the Big 12. Kind of funny how it works that way. And now we are pleased to welcome, for the first time in a long time, my first chance to get a chance to talk with him, Chip Hale, the skipper of the Arizona baseball team. And Chip, first of all, glad to have you here. Secondly, would you say that regardless of what happens this weekend and beyond, it has been a successful 2025 season for your program?
Well, that's a tricky question, to be honest with you. I think this team, from day one of the fall, I think they see more than the regional. Obviously, making a regional for the 4th straight year is historic in our program. It hasn't been done since the 70s. But I'm going to tell you, this group is very focused on winning this regional and getting to a super regional, and obviously getting to Omaha. So we know it's going to be tough. We know we have very stiff competition in all 4 teams. So I don't want to answer that. Let's see how this weekend goes. And, baseball's a funny game. We played fantastic in Globe Life in the Big 12 tournament. I assume we're going to play well again. This team is ready to go. We're rested. The pitchers are ready to go. I think we're as healthy as we've been all year. But you know how baseball is. The ball could bounce funny. And so I'll answer that question on Monday.
Fair enough, Coach. We appreciate you joining us. I know how hectic your schedule is. You alluded to this already, but your guys have won 5 straight games, and they're all away from home. 2 against Houston at Houston, 3 in Texas, and what I just based on what it sounded like on TV was kind of a road game against TCU in the championship game. You're going to be away from home as long as you're in the postseason.
Right.
Does that give you guys some momentum heading into regionals? Not only going in on a winning streak, but having that reminder that you're capable of beating some very good teams away from High Corbett?
Yes, no doubt about it. I think we started the year, we struggled the first 3 in Globe Life, and then we got going and went down to Houston in their big league ballpark and played really well against 3 really good teams. So that gave the guys a lot of confidence. And then our conference was a gauntlet, man. It was tough. Every weekend, whether we were playing West Virginia or TCU at home or even Utah at home, they gave us everything they had. And we had to grind them out. So I think that prepared us very well.
Do your guys feel disrespected at all by not being selected to host a regional?
I think that's sort of the mantra of the group. You know, it was funny when the Big 12 game would go up, you know, we'd be talking. We always meet at 45 before the game, you know, 45 minutes to the hour. And they had on the big screen that kind of a fan poll, who's going to win the game. And it had West Virginia like 79%. And the guys, they love to be the underdog. So I think that's part of it. Like you said about going on the road, this team has been very good on the road, very focused, and played some of our best baseball. So yeah, there's some disrespect. I think the regional thing was a weird one. You know, we were so far out in the RPI. You know, you thought when maybe the people sat down and human beings talked about it, they'd say, how can we not have a host of a conference? It's the third best, you know, rated conference in the country. But they did what they did, and now all of us have to go out, all 8 teams. We're proud of that. We got 8 teams in. Let's all do some damage.
You saw what, you know, the whole RPI thing that you brought up. And I think it's a good question in that, you know, Tommy Lloyd schedules this crazy non-conference schedule for basketball. You guys open with that tournament where Texas A&M, I think, was #1 at the time. They didn't even make I mean, you never know how it's going to be. Will you change your scheduling based on what you saw from RPI this year?
No, not at all.
Okay.
You know, one thing I think is super important, and they're going to that new KPI too more. They're looking at that, which I can't tell you how they compute that. But I think it's important when you come to Arizona, you know you're going to play the best schedule we can put together. You know, next year we start up in Surprise against, you know, a great Oregon State, you know, program. Stanford's going to be, you know, their best recruiting class ever coming in this year. And then one more big time team. And then we're going to go to Las Vegas and play a bunch of, you know, teams from across the country in a tournament later on in the preseason. So we're always going to put ourselves in those tourneys because I think kids, you know, come here for that reason. I think that's, you know, I always think about USC football. You know, they're going to play Notre Dame every year. So I want our kids to know they're going to play the best schedule they can play.
I respect that. Absolutely. And Arizona basketball, we're seeing the same thing. Yeah.
And I think, you know, that should help with RPI. I mean, that's a good RPI. Those are always good RPI games, even though they're neutral sites. You know, what hurt us is we probably had too many losses or too many games in the quad 4 region, you know, and then, you know, Grand Canyon slipped down to quad 3, which hurt us, and we lost to them, of course.
I mean, and you can't predict that. Like, you can't predict A&M who doesn't make the tournament when you play. I want to ask you, as far as pitching goes, when you're playing in a when you're playing in a regional, how do you go about delegating which guys are going to start, which guys are available for each game? How does that is that tricky? I mean, you kind of pulled a rabbit out of the hat with the way you did it in Arlington. It was great.
Yeah, well, that's you can't write it up any better to get 3 starts like we did. So we have 3 legitimate starters. You know, we have 3 guys that we feel like can go 6, maybe 7 innings if things are going well. So obviously those 3 guys will pitch the first 3 games. You know, Kramkowski, Garazar, and Smith Bailey. So those three will go, and you know, in a perfect world, we win it. We win those 3, and we're good. But if we get stuck and we have a bad game, and now all of a sudden you got to win 4 or 5 games, you got a point. We're going to have to figure it out. But we're going to play every game to win that game that day. We're not going to think, ooh, we better hold somebody back because we got a game tomorrow. We just have to worry about winning whatever's going on that day.
And I know, Chip, everyone's talking about a possible, you know, coming down to Oregon and Arizona, but you got Cal Poly. They're very tough. They hit a ton. They're, I think, the 8th best in the country in batting average. What's the key to getting past them and even getting that first win?
Yeah, I think they play a real West Coast style, you know, game. I looked at a lot of video today of their pitchers and their style of play, and there's a lot of bunting in there. A lot of the Augie Garrido stuff back in the old days of, you know, get a couple guys on, we're going to bunt them over every time. So we have to be ready to take the outs they give us. That's one of the things that hurt us in the middle of the year. We were really poor at, you know, the team was sack bunt, and all of a sudden we're not picking it up. We throw it away. We've worked hard in the last month and a half on that and gotten much better. And if we can do that and limit their you know, outs we give them to just a 27, and play just good Arizona baseball. You know, we're gonna battle, and we trust Kramkowski out there to match their obviously their offensive prowess.
All the talk is about Brendan Summerhill and potentially being a first-round future MLB draft pick. But of course, Mason White got all the headlines last week. I know among other things, he passed you up pretty recently. I think for second all-time in extra base hits at Arizona. When your own players are breaking some of your records or surpassing some of your stats at Arizona, any mixed feelings there, or is it just all a sense of pride on your end?
No, it's definitely a sense of pride. I'm happy for him. Don't forget, I played 4 years here, and we played a lot more games than these guys are playing. So that's pretty impressive to do it in 3 years,
Yeah.
like he's done. And he'll get a chance to, move on probably and play pro ball next year. So I think he's helping his draft stock a ton these last 3 or 4 weeks.
But before I forget to ask, and I'm sure you've answered this question already, but I haven't seen it. The bananas, they're everywhere. The guys are wearing banana crowns. Can you just provide the Cliff's Notes
I
version of
have
what's
no
behind that?
idea.
No,
I've said this before. I don't know. It's an inside deal with a group.
it's so
And
inside that
I
you're
just
not in
want
on
to.
it.
I want them to have their own little thing over there.
Okay, so it's so inside that you're not
Yeah,
even privy to it.
I don't even think any of the coaches have any clue what's going on. All I know is I'm looking over there going, "What's going on with these bananas and the goggles with the
The
cups?"
cups, yeah,
You know what? We had an issue my first couple of years here where we weren't really our bench was not collegiate. It was very professional. It was just quiet and
yeah.
cheered for the guys when they did well. And we kind of got after them, last year. And we had the last 2 years, our guys have been excited. And when the umpires are telling you, hey, calm down a little bit, you're doing a good thing. So they've kind of taken it to a new level.
All right, Chip, I want to ask you, how does this team, in your opinion, fourth year here at Arizona, how does this team compare to your other three? Do you think it's a better overall team? Do you think it's comparable? Which one would you say is your best
Yeah,
squad?
I think this could be our best because the pitching and the hitting are both when right. We can win. I always felt like the first couple of years our hitting really outdid our pitching. And it's hard to win baseball games when you're giving up a ton of runs. So I think that overall team, team defense, especially this team is probably our best one. Yeah.
As far as the draw this weekend, I mean, are the guys, does anybody feel like, hey, we got a super tough draw? Are you feeling good about it? Like, what's the confidence level? I know you guys said you like to be the underdog. How do you feel about what you got up there in Eugene?
Yeah, I think it's a great regional. I think obviously Oregon won the Big Ten regular season. They beat UCLA 2 out of 3 to get kind of the crown there. And then the other three the other two are just like us. I mean, they just won their league tournaments, conference tournaments, and did a really good job in doing it. So everybody feels really good about themselves, until that. I always say, momentum is who that first pitcher on the mound is. If Kramkowski can put a 0 up in the first, that's a big, confidence for us. Take a little bit away from them, and then we can get in there and score some runs and get rolling. I think we'll be okay. But yeah, it's not a great draw. I mean, there's no great draws. You can't draw some up, and there's always going to be good teams in your regional.
All right, I got two more for you, Chip. I know you're a busy guy. We appreciate the time. Thoughts on the Big 12 tournament moving to Surprise Stadium next year? You already mentioned the Surprise. I personally kind of like having those kinds of games at smaller venues just for the fan atmosphere element. I remember the Pac-12 championship last year and just how just you could feel the energy. Even watching on TV, you could feel it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you have a great point. I think it's cool. I mean, it was so nice in Globe Life because the weather was under control. You didn't have to worry about storms. You didn't have to worry about heat. And as you know, in Phoenix or Surprise, it's going to be hot. I was a little surprised that, I know they looked at a ton of venues and a bunch in Phoenix that we didn't go, back to Scottsdale where we were for the Pac-12 or maybe even Salt River where the Diamondbacks and Rockies are just because of the shade that those ballparks have. But this group has a real connection with the Rangers. I know Surprise is a Rangers place. Yeah. We'll see. I mean, there's a lot more to do over on the west side of Phoenix, right? The east side of Phoenix than the west side.
Well, that's what I was going to say because I live out in Mesa, and so even that's a hike for me to go to Surprise. But
100%.
All right, last question for you, Chip. We had a discussion on the show last week as far as who are some of the best coaches in the history of Arizona athletics, and of course, Jerry Kindle came up on everyone's list. I know the game has changed a lot since his time and since you were a player, but What did you learn from Coach Kindle that you've been able to apply as Arizona's head baseball coach, and maybe even going into the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, he's a fundamentally sound team. He stressed that so much, and we worked and worked and worked on drills, and he was just such a great infield coach for me. And obviously integrity, man. He had the highest integrity I've ever been around, and he made us play the game the right way. I mean, we the respect for the game, and you always wanted, I always thought about coaches I played for and who I wanted to play. I wanted to win for him. And we always felt like that, let's get this guy. We wanted to get him another championship. And, I hope my players feel that way because that's the way I felt about Jerry.
Last one for you, Chip. Once again, thank you so much for coming on with Shane and me. What are you most proud of in the 4 years you've been at Arizona as a coach?
I'm proud of the guys that we produce, whether they went on to, get drafted. We've had 2 first rounders. We'll probably have another one this year. But just, hearing about guys moving on, having kids, getting married, getting jobs, that's probably the most proud of him because that was part of the reason I wanted to come back. I wanted to see kids grow up and be productive citizens. Obviously, the baseball part's awesome. We love that. The camaraderie, being with the kids is great. But just seeing how they move on in life and be productive.
Congratulations on all of your success again this season in the conference tournament and obviously during the regular season, and kick some ass this weekend and beyond.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Discover more Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino.
Hi, folks. Here are your drinks.
Where having fun means racking up reward credits with the Caesars Rewards loyalty program that can be redeemed for food, free play, hotel stays, and more. Not only here in the city of Maricopa, but also at more than 50 Caesars properties coast to coast. From Harrah's Las Vegas to Caesars Palace in Atlantic City. What are you waiting for? Play for all at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Play.
Shane, for the 3rd straight year, we are pleased to welcome our friend Shotgun Spratling from D1 Baseball to talk everything Arizona baseball in the tournament. Gotta admit, I'm not sure I was expecting to have this conversation after Arizona at the beginning of the season and then, the preseason thinking they lost a lot, and here we are. And the first thing I'm going to ask you is everything that's on, the number one question that's on every Arizona fan's mind. They just won the Big 12, Shotgun. How are they not hosting a regional? What's going on here? Did the Big 12 as a whole get screwed?
That's interesting because TCU is asking the same question. They're going to both these Big 12 teams are going to the state of Oregon this weekend. One of them going to Corvallis, one of them going to Eugene, and wondering why are we not hosting? And it's interesting, the consolidation of power in the 3 conferences, and you would think the Big 12 would get one. Well, who else is complaining? Georgia Tech, because they won a regular season ACC. I think it's because you're seeing these bigger and bigger conferences, and so you do not have the old standards that you once had. You don't have there's a big variance in strength of schedule within conferences. So you're seeing that something that the selection committee talked about, the power of your strength of schedule within conference, not just what you scheduled in non-conference, but who you actually played in conference. So I think that's had something to do with it. So I think that we don't have the normal values that we've had in the past. Like, okay, you meet this benchmark, then you're definitely in, or you meet this benchmark and you're definitely a host. Normally it was, if you win one of the power conferences, of course you got to be in, right? Unless this conference is really, really down, and that's not the case necessarily with the Big 12. I just think there's more parity in the Big 12, and I think that led to some unknowns there. West Virginia could say the same thing. Hey, we won the conference, but when you don't actually beat anybody, then why are you going to get a host? And the fact that they faded down the stretch did not help either. But they didn't have a true series win against a tournament team. I don't think they finished with one. So that's the things the committee are looking for is, okay, what'd you do in the non-conference to go and challenge yourself, and then what'd you do in your conference, and not just what is your record in conference. That doesn't matter as much anymore. It's who you played and what the actual thing is. So previously, you would look at a non-conference schedule and kind of sift out who actually challenged themselves, right? Well, now you're looking through the conference schedules and thinking the same thing. It's not just about number of wins; it's about who you actually beat, which is a little bit different dynamic. You just kind of figured, okay, the schedules are all the same, so you can compare apples to apples. Now even the conference schedules are apples to oranges.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to my next question, Shotgun. And thanks again for joining us. Like I said, we're before we started recording, we're always excited to be able to talk about relevant baseball this time of year. Looking at the NCAA RPI, and this is the last question before we actually get in talking about Arizona baseball, but Arizona won 12 quad one games, 11 quad two games. They had more than all but three teams. You look at their first round opponent, Cal Poly, Cal Poly is a very good team. We'll get to that, but they're neck and neck in RPI, and Cal Poly I think had 4-11 against quad one. So I'm just all this to say that it's difficult for me to make sense of RPI when you look at all those stats, and then you look at okay, well it seems like the ranking doesn't necessarily go with all the other data. Is RPI a good system in your opinion, or does it need to be revamped a bit?
I mean, everyone's always been wanting to revamp RPI, and it's made some changes along the way. And hey, at D1 Baseball, we've developed with our group over the stats guys doing the potential of DSR, and hey, maybe the committee will use that. The committee has added the KPI, the key performance indicators, to as something that they use as well. RPI is still king, but we did see this year that it didn't have quite the impact that maybe it's had in the past. So I think that we're seeing that there is a slow change in it. And hey, the RPI is great, but we also have to remember that was a basketball formula that was created 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Now they've made some tweaks and adjustments to it to do with road wins. And that's part of the reason why I think that Cal Poly's RPI is much closer to Arizona's because Arizona's 10-8 on the road, whereas Cal Poly was 18-9. Now, who did they play? Those things. Cal Poly did get a win at Texas A&M, and there are some quality wins along the way there, but they also did not have any big time series wins. So how is that the series wins are not factored into RPI, but the committee does consider those. So there's all these different indicators that go in. So the RPI is still a tool. But I think we're seeing that there's less and less reliance on it. Now we'll see if it changes next year when there's a new committee chair. Jay Antigua's the committee chair this year was a former head coach at Southeastern Louisiana, so therefore maybe you took less of a reliance on it because he knows as a mid-major, hey, there's some challenges that go along with it. So maybe they didn't rely on it quite as heavily. Whereas next year, if you get another AD in there, they're just going straight off the stats. They're just going straight off the metrics, and maybe they go straight off RPI again, which have been the case, especially for the host sites the last 3 or 4 years in particular.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And I think Arizona was seeded pretty fairly. It's just interesting to look at all the other stats. I kind of play a game where I try to guess where this team is going to be ranked in RPI based on everything else, and I can never get it right. But anyway, speaking of Arizona, let's dive into the Wildcats. I think the theme this year is they kind of played to the level of their competition. They've beaten some very good teams. They beat TCU 3 times, I think, this year, West Virginia 3 times. They also almost got swept at home against Utah, which finished last in the Big 12. What are your overall thoughts on this team?
It's an intriguing team. The fact that they get Brendan Summerhill back and he's healthy right now, I think that's huge. That's a piece that's been missing off and on all season. Just trying to be healthy. They start off the season, they go and they play really tough competition that opening weekend, and everybody goes, "Oh no, are they in trouble?" Because they got beat up in a couple of those games. They lose a one-run game to Ole Miss, but then they get beat up against Clemson and Louisville. But then they reel off this long run of wins. I saw them at West Virginia. I thought that was really kind of a point of to see demarcation of where exactly is this group? Is this group good? Because you go to West Virginia, that is a hostile environment to go into, and especially West Virginia. I think there were some like 24-2 at the time, and to go in there and take that series was really big for them. And then they played they've lost a couple series they shouldn't have. The Utah one stands out, but maybe that's just the fact that there is that familiarity so well, and you get beat on a day they just didn't play well that weekend. But I think that they have the potential. Now, the question, they've grown into their pitching staff. They had to replace a ton off that staff from last year. So I think that, with some young horses there, that's something that, hey, there were going to be some ups and downs, I think, along the way. And you think, hey, we'll rely on an offense that has Brendan Summerhill, that has Mason White carrying the way. And Mason White a little bit up and down. The stats are still really good, but there's been times where he's just you look at the swings and you go, he's just not locked in today. And other times where you're like, that guy, no one's going to get that guy out. And then Brendan Summerhill, potential first round draft pick, when you don't have him in the lineup, that's going to obviously change things, change the dynamic. And he's just such a unique player at the top of the lineup with the fact that he can slug, but he also can just cause havoc, whether it's a ball on the ground and you're worried, okay, is he taking two because, it's not right at somebody in the outfield? Is he going three on trying to get a triple, especially playing at home? So, I think him not being in the lineup consistently was definitely something that was an element that was missing for them. But the big thing is, are you playing your best ball at the right time? Now, obviously, they didn't play great against Utah, but since then they bounced back and took that series on the road at Houston and then ran through the Big 12 tournament. So, are they playing their best ball right now? That's the big question for them because they got a tough task at hand to go up to Eugene and try to win a regional up there.
Shotgun, one thing that I have been critical about Chip Hale is the fact that he's won two postseason games in what, 3 years, something like that. And, and they both came in the same year. Arizona won the Pac-12 last year and then got, you're thinking, hey, they went on a run here and then they get smoked in the tournament. When you're making your picks in the postseason, do you think about, hey, Chip Hale is not a good tournament coach, or do you just throw the previous seasons out and focus on what have you done for me lately as far as this team goes?
I mean, it's a little bit of both. I don't think that I think that I don't look at Chip Hale and think there's a reputation there necessarily. Sometimes you just lose. There's been plenty of teams along the way that have had really good teams that just don't show up for one weekend, and that's what it ends up being. I don't think there's enough of a pattern there for me to say, "Ooh, I like this Arizona team, but I just don't trust the coaching staff when it gets into the postseason." Because you look at what they've been able to do in the conference tournaments. And yes, that is a postseason run, depending on how you value the postseason, the conference tournaments, to whether you consider it true postseason. But it's very similar formats a lot of times. It's just the way you're kind of laying out your pitching and different things like that. That is very much like the postseason. And having seen the Pac-12 tournament the last couple of years with Arizona being in it, I've never looked at it and been like, I just don't understand what they're doing. And that's usually when I question a coaching staff in a tournament situation, like, why are you over abusing this guy, or why are you not using this guy? Those type of things. I've not had those concerns with Arizona.
Okay, fair. With that said, as far as the Wildcats go here, did they get a good draw at Oregon, or did they get kind of is this a tough one where you're like, I think we're another year of Chip Hale discussion because Oregon and the other teams, as Shane alluded to earlier, might be a little too tough for this team to come out of this region.
I think this is a really tough regional just overall. Utah Valley, I know that they're a four seed. They're tough. I just saw them down. I've seen all these teams recently. So Utah Valley goes down. I see them down in Arizona win the WAC tournament and kind of ran through that one. Now they've kind of have been up and down, and they don't have the depth that you would expect or that you would expect for a team that can make a run in this. But Cal Poly, I just saw them. Now they didn't have the high end wins this season, but just watching that team can hit. Everything coming off the bats is loud. The top of their lineup: Zach Daudet, Ryan Finn, Alejandro Garza, Casey Murray Jr. Like those guys, everything that comes off the bat is loud coming off of their bats, and that is not even including Jack Collins, who was their four-hole hitter for forever this season, and he's really struggled recently. So they decided to put him in the 8-hole. And the last two games, he was fantastic for him. Hit a big home run a couple of games ago to help them beat Irvine to force the if necessary game. They win that game too. I was really impressed with him. And the big question will be, I don't really know, and you guys could probably tell me better because I haven't watched Arizona all season, but how do they do against left-handed pitching? Because Cal Poly can send out 6'2" to 6'4" left-hander after left-hander after left-hander after left-hander after left-hander, and that's something they did this weekend. Now they also have legit arms. Like Ethan Marmy is a guy that they won't pitch against Arizona necessarily in the first game, but maybe they meet down a little bit later in the regional. He pitched yesterday to start the game against UC Irvine, the Big West Tournament Championship, and he was 95 up to 97. With a good kind of cutter slider and a power changeup at 89. So like that's their Sunday guy. Their Sunday guy can throw 95. So don't look at Cal Poly and go, oh, it's a Big West team. Oh, it's a mid-major team. They're not going to have the same talent. No, they've got some dudes on that team as well. This is the same program. Has produced, from Brooks Lee to, a number of pitchers and stuff that have made into the bigs. So they have produced talent, and Larry Lee is a very good coach. He's, probably criminally underrated on the national scale. Produces consistently quality teams. They just always start slow. This year they started slow too, but they still were able to make it in. So that makes them a dangerous team because they always play better and better as the season progresses. And that's just kind of how they've been. But they usually put themselves in like a 15 game hole at the beginning of the season, and then they can't get out of the RPI hole that they start at the beginning of the year. This year they were able to do just enough to get in. Well, they were right on the bubble and should have been already considered in, and then they won their way into the Big West because the Big West tournament this year being the first one in 27 years, I think it is. But yeah, they got some guys, so they're going to be a definite challenge too. So I think it's a very tough regional because you don't have an easy game to start with.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can, feel like you're comfortable, not necessarily saving your ace because you're not going to do that as a 2 seed, but you don't feel comfortable enough to like, we don't have to go to our impact guys and maybe we can save them a little bit. I think Cal Poly is going to challenge Arizona in that regard. And then Oregon is a wagon. Like that group has gotten better and better as the season goes along. They've got dudes upon dudes. Honestly, I'm surprised they didn't win the Big Ten tournament because of how good they've been. Now, all it takes is one game in the Big Ten tournament to fall out with a single elimination in the semifinals. But their lineup is deep. They got multiple guys that can hit the ball at the park. They have, I think, what is it, 4 or 5 guys that now have over 15 home runs. They have Mason Novell, who's leading the nation. I believe he's still leading the nation, 26 homers. And then you go to the pitching side, and they got Grayson Grinsell, who's just, is able to dominate without elite stuff because he can really, really pitch lefty, kind of an undersized lefty. So you go from undersized lefty, 5'10", Grayson Grinsell, so by the time you get to Sunday, you got Jason Wrights is coming in, who's 6'11" from the right hand side over the top, and he's up to 97. So it's a unique kind of mix and match. And then probably the most important arm for them on this team is Cole Stokes out of the bullpen. He's got MLB stuff. He's got a fastball that's been up to 99 this year, and he's got a slider that should have to have a blinker on it because it just turns left when it gets to the plate. So they've got legit arms on this team. They've got legit bats. They are deep. And they're going to be playing at home. This is a team that has experience as well. They've been to 2 super regionals back-to-back years. And the fact that they're playing at home, they do a tremendous job in the postseason of getting fans there and making that place rowdy. It's hard for me to pick against the Ducks in this with them playing at home, but I think it's going to be a very compelling regional for sure.
Yeah, and I've been reminded constantly on social media just today that Cal Poly, the Big West is a legit conference in baseball, and Cal Poly does have the nation's 8th best batting average. So definitely don't know if fans are thinking about Arizona, Oregon already. Got to take care of business against Cal Poly first. Well, with that said, you went over Oregon. It doesn't seem like there's anything they don't do well. They have 107 home runs this season. That's the 9th most in the country. Team ERA just under 4, 14th best team ERA in the country. If it does come down to Arizona versus Oregon, how do the Wildcats get past the Ducks and advance to super regionals? How will it happen?
Well, the interesting thing for me will be what does Oregon decide to do with their pitching rotation? Because Grinsell is, I think probably far and away I'm trying to think over the top of my head of all 4 teams. I think he's far and away the best starter in this regional. He's 9-3 on the season, 2.62 ERA, under 1 WHIP. He just goes out there and pitches. He has a nasty changeup. Almost 100 strikeouts so far this season, and he gives you length. And it's something that early in his career he wasn't able to do. He would go 5 innings, and his pitch count would be at 100. He's gotten much more efficient this year, using his breaking ball to get some early weak contact. So, do they save him for game 2? It's an interesting possibility that they could do because Colin Clark has been their Saturday guy, and he's the most susceptible one because Jason Wrights on Sunday has been really good, especially down the stretch, has gotten better and better as the season gone on. Colin Clark has been up and down a little bit, still has good stuff and still can beat you for sure. And real quick to go back to Cal Poly, you mentioned that they're top 10 in hitting. They're top 10 in hits, top 10 in average. They're also, I think, before the championship game yesterday, they were 9th or 10th in fielding percentage, so they field the ball really well. They don't walk you either. They're 15th in the nation in walks per 9 innings. They don't strike out a ton of guys, but they just let you hit the ball to their defense, and they go play great defense. So, they're a well-rounded team in that regard, too. So getting to Oregon will be a challenge for any team in this regional. But, yeah, I think that the one weakness of Oregon is potentially in the bullpen. That's where they've had struggles this season. That's where they've had some issues, and that's why I think Cole Stokes is maybe the biggest key piece in this for Oregon because he's been really, really good the second half of the season, whereas he struggled in the first half. Him and Santi Garcia both have MLB stuff. Their coaching staff has told me they expect both of those guys to be MLB guys eventually. So those two guys, you got one on the right, one on the left, and then that's not even their closer. Seth Maddox is their closer. He's the guy that they trust the most with the ball at the end of the games. He just doesn't have the same stuff. He still has really good stuff, just not quite the high 90s that you see from Stokes and Garcia. So I think that's the one area, though, where they have had some struggles this season. That's where they've gotten in trouble. That's where I think you have to attack. If you can get, potentially if you face Colin Clark in that 1-0 game, if you can get him out of the game early and get to their bridge guys, I think that's where they could potentially be susceptible.
Okay, so a little bit of hope in there among all the praise on Oregon and Cal Poly, which I completely get. All right, last question for you, Shotgun. It was announced the Big 12 tournament is going to be moving from Globe Life Field, the home of the Texas Rangers this year, to I forget the name of the spring training facility in Surprise, Arizona. I kind of like that just because thinking back to last year in Scottsdale, another spring training facility, it was I wasn't there, but even on TV, it sounded like a great atmosphere. You go to Globe Life and, whenever anyone hits a home run, you see all the empty seats back there. Do you prefer these kinds of tournaments in smaller venues? Do you think it adds to the atmosphere or no?
I like it being on campus most of all, but that adds a whole logistical element to it. Especially if you're giving it to a host seed or a top seed or whatnot. The interesting thing though is climate controlled in Globe Life. You don't have to deal with weather. Now you're not going to have to deal with rain in Surprise, but you're going to deal with extreme heat,
right?
And the ball is going to fly. Now I went to 6 different conference tournaments in the past week or so, so I saw kind of the full gamut. Everything from literally on Monday, I was at the Patriot League Championship, the final game, and I was shivering outside taking photos. 2 days later, I was in Arizona, and it was 99 degrees at first pitch. So the ball is going to jump in Surprise. We saw that in Scottsdale with Braden Montgomery hitting balls, tanks over the batter's eye in center field. It was like 430, hitting tanks over, the restaurant out in right field in the Scottsdale Stadium. So that's going to be at a different element. And how does that impact the teams? Now, we didn't see the Pac-12 tournament long enough to really say that there was a true trend. Oh, these were really good teams, but they just don't play well when they get in regionals because maybe they're worn down from the week before. And, there were definitely some adjustments made to the Pac-12 tournament format to try to limit that after that ridiculous Oregon State UCLA game where UCLA comes back and they probably would tell you that they didn't want to win that game that they did because then they had to play another game and they're using a bunch of guys that really hadn't pitched all season. So how are you going to build momentum going into it? So that'll add a different element is, are you getting worn down by the heat in Surprise? Is it changing? How does your pitching feel after you leave Surprise if they're giving up some runs and stuff? So that's kind of the different element there. But I really like it out there just because you're not going to have to deal with weather and you can get in, you can get in every game that you need to get in and get the tournament continue running because it's always concerned when you go to like to Hoover or something for the SEC championship and they're like, oh, we're starting game 4 today at 11:58 p.m. And so then I know no one cares about the welfare of the student athletes anymore, but the welfare of them being able to play that game, get their sleep, all that type of stuff. But be prepared for the next week. How much are you wearing out your conference the week before? It really, really matters.
Last one for you, Shotgun. Well, first of all, 2 questions. First of all, what do you think of the Big 12 as a baseball conference? And how much weaker, in your opinion, is it than the Pac-12 was? As I was kind of debating this with a friend.
It's interesting that it's a lot different, and we still don't really know the full extent of it because the Big 12 was really good when they had Texas and Oklahoma added in there. So you take away 2 of the thoroughbreds, and you're adding in 2 really great teams in Arizona State. But what has BYU added to the league? What is Utah adding? What is Central Florida adding? What is West Virginia? It's adding more travel. So that's made it a bit much more difficult slate for everyone. Just these major conferences and how everyone's having to travel now. I think you saw that. Look at Stanford and Cal, how they just went pew and took a nosedive in the second half of the season because you're going back and forth coast to coast every other weekend, basically. And I thought it was going to be, end up being the way it ended up playing out, and it did. I think USC, I felt like kind of, struggled at the very end of the season because of all their travel. So that's one of the question marks I have with the bigger conferences now is, are you mitigating that? Are you, finding ways to keep teams from having to travel a ton? But I think with the expansion of that conference, it's unique. You can recruit in a lot of different places, but I do not think it is quite as good as the Pac-12 was. And now the Pac-12 was down the last few years compared to what it historically has been, but still the Pac-12 reigned supreme, and there was still more talent on a Stanford or a bad Oregon team or Oregon State or whatever, a team that's not playing up to full potential. A Washington team. Look at the Washington team last year. Not a very good team, but they have Iva Arquette on that team, who's going to be a top 10 pick coming up. Now, he went to Oregon State to make that happen. But, you have talent on all these rosters, and I don't necessarily know the full extent of the talent on, say, UCF or a Cincinnati or West Virginia. And I really like the West Virginia program and what they've done there, and they've had J.J. Weatherholt last year. But that's a team, that's a program that's still building. I feel like there's multiple programs that are still building and trying to try to prove themselves as a power conference team. Even though some of them have been in that league for a while, I feel like they're still trying to show that they are truly that. Whereas in the Pac-12, it was, that was the standard.
Fair enough. Good explanation. And finally, for those of us who are in pools this postseason, who am I picking? Who's going to win? Don't follow SEC baseball during the year. Who should I pick to win it all this year?
That's so difficult to say. My preseason pick didn't even make it into the NCAA tournament. That was Virginia. So much talent returning on that team, and that's kind of the craziness of the season. At D1 baseball, our number one and number two preseason teams didn't even make it to the tournament because Texas A&M
wild.
and Virginia. Now there were some injuries there and blah blah blah, but we expected those teams with as much talent as they had to be able to overcome those type of things, and wasn't the case. So I think it kind of leaves it open. I mean, Vanderbilt is the number one overall seed in the tournament, and a month ago they were probably a 2 seed, which tells you they've jumped at least 16 spots in the last month, and that's kind of rare. Usually you kind of know the one or two or three teams that are vying for that number one seed throughout the last month. And so, who's going to get hot is really going to be. There's not a Paul Skeens, Dylan Cruz, LSU type of team this year that just can overwhelm you with talent. There are teams that are really talented for sure. But there's not that one team that is just shining bright above everyone else with their talent. So I think it's just whoever gets hot at the right time. A team like Tennessee could do that. They did it. They had more talent last year, but they can get hot at the right time. I wouldn't be surprised if LSU makes a run in the tournament. So North Carolina has pitching upon pitching upon pitching. Those are the type of things that play in the postseason. But I think I just picked North Carolina in our picks to not make it out of the regional. Now I wanted to pick Holy Cross, who's the number 4 seed there, but I couldn't quite go that far. But yeah, there's some really intriguing teams. Keep an eye on Northeastern. As a sleeper pick, they've won 27 straight games. They've won, I think, 37 of 38. They have been on a ridiculous run. They have the best ERA in the nation. They're going to Tallahassee, though, and that's a really tough place to play. And they're playing some really talented teams down there, starting with Mississippi State as their 3 seed in that regional. So that's a kind of an underdog to keep an eye on, I think. But yeah, it's going to be hard to pick exactly who to win. I think it'll end up being whoever gets hot that will make runs. And is Arizona a team that's capable of that? They sure as hell are. I mean, Aaron Walton gets going. You got Michalakis has been a guy that always comes up with clutch hits. If you get Brendan Summerhill going, like he's the straw that stirs the drink. He just creates so much havoc potentially for them. And someone like Krakowski, has the stuff that he's eventually going to be an elite pitcher. Not quite there yet as a youngster, but now's the time that some guys take that step forward.
All right, Shane, I know you like to place those long shot bets.
Yeah,
Arizona and Northeastern, both 70-1 per DraftKings to win it all.
Fair enough.
Just keep an eye. I mean, Shotgun gave us, is that not worth a couple bucks?
Well, and another name I can't ever forget is Coastal Carolina, because it came down to U of A and Coastal Carolina back in, Oh gosh, when was that?
2016?
2016, 2017.
2017?
Jay
Yeah,
Johnson's
something.
first
20,
year.
2016, I believe. And
Yep,
and
yep.
I saw Coastal Carolina earlier this year just on a whim. A game I was at got rained out, and I was like, what's the closest game I can get to? And there was a game 3 hours away, so I drove to James Madison to see Coastal Carolina. Didn't know anything about them, and the first guy I see is their Saturday guy. He's up to 97 and has nasty breaking ball. I'm like, okay, this Coastal Carolina thing, huh, this might be pretty good.
Oh,
The
yeah.
No, they're-
Chanticleers.
We remember
25-1. We're staying away. Yeah, we can't do it. LSU and Coastal Carolina, we can't do it. Shotgun. Hey, you know what? You taught us so much once again. We always appreciate having you on the show, and I hope to talk to you again before next year.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. Always a pleasure to jump on.
Shane, what did you make of Chip Hale's comments to us? I'll just say at the start, I was impressed with him saying, hey, I don't know if it's a successful season. Ask me next week. That gave me a little, I was impressed by that.
That's fair, and I think it was a good coach's answer. I mean, you don't want to say we're successful because all their goals are still in front of them. It'd be a little weird if he said yes, but I think he's also proud of the team and what they've accomplished, and so I think that was a fair answer, and I enjoy it. I'm kind of surprised he doesn't know the story behind the bananas, but I guess whatever works. But no, it was great talking to Chip. I told him after we were done recording that. I remembered our first chat, which you weren't a part of. It was just me and him because you weren't available. But I remember him saying that he wanted this to be his last job, and I told him I hope it is, and you're doing great, and hope it continues. So great to chat with him. I chatted with him the first time I talked to him, by the way, was back in 2004 when he was the manager of the Tucson Sidewinders, because they were about to have an exhibition game against U of A baseball. And of course, he being the U of A alum, I talked to him about his memories of U of A baseball. So kind of funny how things work out.
Sure.
And glad he's having success here, and hopefully he'll continue to prove you wrong, and they'll have some success in regionals.
Let's talk about, in our last segment here, CFB Fight Club at Pack Fight on Twitter put out their Mount Rushmore of Arizona football. Rob Gronkowski, Teddy Bruschi, Lance Briggs, and Mike Bell. Shane, this list is not good. I'm not saying it's all wrong, but it's not good. Who would be on your Mount Rushmore of Arizona football?
Well, first of all, I think this list, it kind of went a little heavier on guys who had a lot of success at the pro level. Like even, I know Mike Bell didn't have a ton, but
100%. Yeah.
Mike Bell won a Super Bowl with the Saints, so you got to count that. But I think that this kind of list, because I know we were talking about this because I was the one who suggested it. So I'm just like, okay, great. Now I got to come up with a list. I think it's a little tougher than men's basketball because I think the number one guy on most fans' lists, at least people who could remember far back enough, would be Sean Elliott. But I don't know if there's a unanimous choice here. For this list, I'm going to go on primarily and almost exclusively on what they did at Arizona. Okay. So I think the top guy from that perspective would probably still be Teddy Bruschi. When you think Desert Swarm, he's the guy that probably comes to mind before anyone else. And you can certainly factor in his success with the Patriots in the NFL. After that, it gets tougher. Like I said, Rob Gronkowski. He played 22 games at Arizona. He did great when he was here. He essentially played barely 2 seasons. So from that perspective, I'm leaning more toward other guys. And so my next guy on my list would be Ricky Hundley. He's a 2-time All-American. He helped usher in the winning streak over ASU in the 80s after the Devils had dominated that rivalry for a long time under Frank Kush. After that, trying to put recency bias aside, I got to go with Tedoroa McMillan. The best receiver Arizona's ever had. He put up ridiculous numbers, was a big part of Arizona's 10-win season in 2023. And then, thinking about guys who made an impact in an Arizona uniform, you can go with Chris McAllister, Antoine Cason, Lance Briggs, Kadeem Carey, Nick Foles, Art Lupino, if you want to go way back. None of those would be wrong answers, but I'm going to go with Antoine Cason. He played 46 games in 4 seasons at Arizona, was an All-American his senior year, won the Thorpe Award. Also made some huge special teams plays for Arizona. And I know the Wildcats record wasn't good while he was there, but I think he was a big reason that Mike Stoops and his staff were finally able to get Arizona back to relevancy in the latter half of the 2000s. So my 4 would be Teddy Bruschi, Ricky Hundley, Tedero McMillan, and Antoine Cason. But so many other guys I could justify putting in that top 4 as well.
Okay, we're fairly close on this one. I think
All
when
right.
it comes to a Mount Rushmore, I'm not saying the 4 best players in Arizona football history, but recognizable. I mean, Rob Gronkowski is the most recognizable Arizona
Sure.
football player of all time. Has to be on that list.
Yeah.
The best defensive season in Arizona football history was Scooby Wright in 2014.
Yeah.
Has to be on there.
Thought about him as
Scooby
well.
Wright won every single award basically that you could win in 2014 for a
And he's a good
defensive
friend of
player.
ours, so he's probably going to get on my case for leaving him off this list. But
And that's fair. I mean, he probably should give you some crap for that.
it's fine.
Teddy Bruschi, obviously another recognizable face on the defensive side of the ball. And this last one is tough. And I'm probably going to do recency bias in a way, but not to as recent as Tedero McMillan. I'm going to Antoine Cason because he did win the Thorpe Award and he was a first-team All-American. And you know what? I agree with you on him. Like, you gotta, I think Arizona, when you think Arizona football, you think defense. Desert Swarm,
Yeah.
defense. So 3 of my 4 are gonna be defensive players. I'm going Rob Gronkowski, Antoine Cason, Teddy Bruschi, and Scooby Wright.
Yeah, and I think that's a good list. And it's kind of like last week we talked about who are the best all-time coaches in Arizona athletics history. It was an open-ended question. How do you define best? By the most recognizable names? By the most championships? There's a different way to go about it. My criteria was, again, number 1, number of games played in an Arizona uniform, which is why I didn't put Scooby on the list, even though he probably could have been on for sure. And number 2, just guys who not so much the pro success, but the collegiate success. That's what I focus on a little bit more. If you want to go, some people are going to think I'm crazy for leaving Gronk off that list, and deservedly so. And he put up great numbers at Arizona, but again, we only got about 2 seasons out of him. So I tend to think about guys who made an impact for at least 3, if not 4 years, and so that's how I kind of justify the list.
Fair enough. It's an interesting debate. Let us know what you think in the comments on Twitter, in YouTube, or on the YouTube page. Appreciate it. What a show we had for you this week. Shotgun Spratling, Chip Hale. Awesome. Good luck to Arizona baseball. How far do you think they go, Shane?
Shotgun didn't make me feel any better about Arizona's chances after talking to him. I do think they beat Cal Poly. I think it comes down to Arizona, Oregon, and I think Oregon edges out the Wildcats in a very, very tough game. I wouldn't be shocked to see Arizona advance. I kind of think they maybe have, no pun intended, a bit of a chip on their shoulder after getting snubbed for regionals, but the Ducks are really good. I know D1 Baseball has them ranked 5th overall in the country. So I think that's going to be tough to overcome. There's very little that Oregon doesn't do well. So I'm going to take Oregon, just edging out Arizona to advance.
So I think Arizona will win some games this weekend. So I think that'll break kind of the drought of sorts in the NCAA tournament. With that said, I do not think they get past Oregon. I think they lose to the Ducks twice and are eliminated. But hey, they got us through May. We're talking Arizona live sports.
Love it.
We only have 2 months before football training camp. We'll find a way to fill them as we always do. And
Always do.
I hope they prove us wrong. And we're talking super regionals next week. We're talking more college baseball. So hey, what a great show we had. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.